Alright everybody, so I just wanted to show you guys real quick my workflow from designer to Arnold. Um, Substance has made a plugin for Maya and I think it's very useful. Now I think you should learn how to plug in the maps without using the plugin, but for this tutorial I want to show how to use the plugin and show you how simple it is. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm opening up this designer file that I created. I followed a tutorial by Daniel Thiger. He has multiple tutorials, and all the ones that I've done are very good. I had a lot of fun with this bark one, and I've learned a whole bunch. So I highly recommend doing it. I have a pretty standard bark texture here. It's pretty simple, generic, not based off any exact tree, but I have multiple references. So anyways, what we're going to do is I have my shader maps right here, and I have roughness, a base color, a normal, a height, and an AO map. What I'm going to do is come up to this little toolbar or a little wrench here. I'm going to export my outputs, and I already have a file set up, so I'm just going to export it to my Maya file, my source images, and I have the file already set. So we have a base color, normal, roughness, high, AO. It automatically exports the alpha maps in a raw format and the RGB map in our base color and RGB format. So we're going to export. All right. Once the export is done, you just exit out of that. I'm going to lower this. I have a Maya file already open, so we're going to come to this. Now basically all this scene is, I have a few different lights to help with shade or shadows and color temperature. And this sky dome is very low. This is just to fill in the object as much as possible for direct lighting. I have my camera set up, so it's going to be directly on the ball or the sphere, just like this. All right, so just so you guys can see, I'm going to open up my hyper shader and I'm going to delete all of the current shaders that are in the scene. Just delete unused nodes. It's not going to delete the main standard shader that Arnold has created, but if you go into my existing, I have one standard surface and one Lambert. The Lambert is currently attached to the object, as you can see right here. So this is what we're going to do. We installed the Substance plugin on Algorithmic's website. You can just go on to Google and type in Substance for Maya plugin, and you should be able to find it fairly easy. All you do is install it, run the installer, and then close and reopen your Maya. Then you're going to come up here to Settings and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and it should be on here, right here. You should have this exact same little tab open, and you can just I auto load and I load and auto load, so make sure that that's loaded. And I like auto load. Takes a couple of seconds extra to open when you open up your Maya, but I like to have all my plugins on at all times. So, anyways, we have our camera locked, so I don't have to worry about moving anything. What I'm going to show you now is how to use the plugin. You just click on the tab up here. We go to Apply Workflow to Maps. Now, something cool that they have within the plugin is you can do all 5 of these different render engines. They've made a workflow for them, and we're obviously going to be using Arnold, but they do have one for V-Ray, Redshift, Renderman, and then I've never used Maxwell, but it is there. So we'll use Arnold. You can go in individually to this file and select your maps, or you can do the easier thing, select multiple maps. We're going to go to our source images folder. This is the bark maps that I just exported. We're going to Control Shift select all of them. I'll drop them. Now, what you will notice right away is only 4 of the maps dropped in and not the ambient occlusion map. I will explain why it doesn't automatically import the ambient occlusion map and how you can use the ambient occlusion map, but you do not have to. Based on Substance exports, the naming conventions, it's going to automatically import into each folder that's necessary. So we're just going to apply that. Now, I have the ball selected, or the sphere, and it doesn't automatically create a shader for that object that you have selected. It actually just creates a shader, in this case an Arnold shader, that you can apply to an object. So now that you can see, before I only had Lambert and standard surface, now I have AI standard surface, which is the shader that it just created through the plugin. So I'm automatically going to apply that. And you can already see, the shaders are laid out for the most part properly. I would say, indefinitely. So I'm going to select this object. I'm going to rename my shader because that's convenient. Let's do just a bark example. That's nice. All right. So what it did is automatically plugged in the color, the roughness. We have the normal down here. Plugs in the normal, raw. I actually like to uncheck alpha is luminance for my normal maps, but it works either way. And then it will automatically change tandem space and normals, which is what you want, and it'll flip on the RNG channel. Now, one thing that I like to do, especially since I'm bringing this from Designer and I want to display the tileability of the material that I've made, I'm going to open up the Hyper Shader. We'll pull this up here. Now right here you have your input and output, and I want to see the input and out connections to the object that I've selected. So it's going to bring me this shader. Now the reason that it says set 1 is because Substance is the one that created it. It doesn't just say your AI standard 1 or whatever. So we're also going to get the input and output of that. And now we have our bark example shader that we just created. Now for convenience of this tutorial, I'm going to move around these nodes because they bug me. So we're going to put our displacement down here, our base color on top, and then we're going to switch around our normal and roughness. So now what you can see is it automatically plugs in our normal map to where it needs to go. It automatically plugs in our roughness. It has our base color plugged in. Weirdly enough, it has a multiply and divide, and I'll show you why. And then it has our height plugged into a displacement shader node that is now plugged into our displacement shader on our AI standard shader. Now, I'm going to open up a little bit of an Arnold window view so that you guys can see what I'm going to be explaining. We're going to do very. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Now, all I've done is I've plugged in the shaders or the texture maps, and we basically have an object that's not getting displaced properly anyway, and it does not display my tileable material at all. So the first thing I'm going to do is come into my Hyper Shader, and right here we have our 2D texture or place 2D texture node, which is used to control where the textures get placed based on your UVs and such. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to repeat UV, and we're just going to tile it by 2. You do the U and the V, and already in the viewport you can see how much better this is going to be. So if I press play, we can see relatively I'm going to have some tree knots here, and the rest is going to be displaying the bar with some displacement on each side. Now I'm going to show you this ambient occlusion multiply over a base color map, and the reason that I'll be doing this is I want to simulate basically if you have a direct light, you're going to have you don't want these cracks and crevices to have a deeper shadow than normally. And if I didn't have an advanced lighting setup like I do right here, I wouldn't be getting these shadows as well as you'd want to display them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in my ambient occlusion map right here, so you can see how it's going to lay out. We're going to put it in raw because it's a grayscale alpha map. Alpha is luminance. And basically what you're going to see, you can kind of see it down here. Oh, you know what? I forgot. Since I imported it and it's separate from the Substance plugin, we're going to have to tile the UVs as well. So let's do that. These are also going to be 2. And you can already see just in the viewport that these cracks are going to be a little bit darker. So what it's doing is it's taking the darker values inside the grayscale map, and it's going to be making the RGB channel, it's going to be reading the RGB, and it's going to be making those shaders darker, or those colors. So watch, we'll do a little demonstration. So if I press play, you can see overall the material is going to get a little darker, but in specific, you're going to see the difference between these two. So right here is our RGB multiplied by an AO. And in this one, we just have regular RGB with the exact same lighting setup. And you may like one or the other. Once we put on the displacement, you can see the difference. And in my final renders, I actually have this very all right. We'll get rid of that little there. We're gonna stop the render. Now we're gonna try to add some displacement. And basically what we're gonna do is we're just gonna up the scale in which we do that. Inside this displacement shader node, they have the displacement, which is where you plug in your height map. Don't worry about vector displacement for now. And then for scale, I like to just leave this at 1. There's a separate way to control how far your object gets displaced or how far the vertex gets displaced, and also how many subdivisions you're going to have with your displacements. Another thing to look at is your bounce padding. Basically what this bounce padding is going to do is, in some cases, if you're going to be displacing an object to a very extreme amount based on the object size, the rays that are casted that might be trying to read that information might get cut off. So you might get like kind of like a cube. So let's just say like if I was trying to displace this, it would like cut off a cube. So you just turn this thing up. It ups your render time. I like to just turn it to 1. It's just, you're not going to run into any problems. Now we're going to go, what we're going to do is click on our object. Now this is going to be for the displacement scale. So you go straight to your sphere shape. That's what this is called. I'm going to go down to Arnold because we're working in Arnold. First thing I'm going to do is go to subdivision. Now it's complete preference on which type you use, linear or Cat Clark. I use Cat Clark. I've never changed it. And for my iterations, since this is relatively high poly already, I can just do 1 or 2. So for this tutorial sake, I'm just going to do 1. And then we're going to go down to displacement attributes. Now real quick, what iterations are going to be doing for every single number that you add, it's going to be quadrupling your the density of your geometry. So 1 is plenty. This is quadrupling what we already have. Like our verts are at 8,000, so we're already quadrupling that. And for a render's sake, this is only when you render, so it's really not too big of a deal. The convenient thing about changing it per object and doing it right here is it basically makes a reference of your object, so you're not messing with this mesh at all. When you go to render, it's going to reference this object and multiply the geometry by 4. So I'm just going to leave this at 1. Most people will put it at 2 or 3 because you might as well get the best, but it's going to extend the render time. And then as for heights and bounce padding, add bounce padding at 1. That's what I like. And then for height, since it's at 1, you can literally see like it's not displacing very much at all. So what we're going to do is, since I've already done this, I found that like 14.5 for this specific height map works relatively good. It might be a little too much, but we'll see the difference in a second. So I'm just going to snip this one as well. And right away you can see how much this displacement gets affected. We're just doing a little quick one, so we'll screen snip this. And then we're also going to stop the render so I can show you the difference. All right. I mean, it's clear. So this is what we have before we upped our height displacement to 14.5. This is after. This isn't even rendered. This isn't even fully rendered. But you just see, along with the AO map, you can just see the cracks and how deep it's going to be. Look at that. So these are actually the verts getting displaced. So in Game Engine, you don't want to do this to every object because obviously you're going to be multiplying your geometry when you go into a play mode. But in cinematics, or you can mildly displace objects in Engine. This is what you're going to do. Now you can see with the lighting setup that I have, I like to display my warms and my cools. You want to see how they're both going to react in different situations. And yeah, so what I'm going to do now is, I believe that's all. So I'm going to close out the tutorial in the video, and I will show you what the final renders look like. Thank you.